Now we've got, for example, a a bike repair shop, 2 art galleries, 4 Asian restaurants, a brew pub, a coffee and beer house, and it's just this little 2-block area. So we've
Wow.
really come a long way. And it's
Wow.
all, I think it's all because of the Hudson Valley Rail Trail, Walkway Over the Hudson, and people's interest in being outdoors and recreating.
Today we have Jeff Anzevino, AICP, is the Director of Land Use Advocacy at Scenic Hudson, based in Poughkeepsie, New York, which you'll be talking about their new headquarters here, where he advances resilient, sustainable riverfront development and expands public access to the Hudson River. He manages key projects like the Westchester RiverWalk extension under the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, and co-authored Revitalizing Hudson Riverfronts, which earned a U.S. EPA Environmental Quality Award. Wow, good for you. A certified planner and adjunct instructor at Marist University, Jeff blends his professional expertise with a lifelong passion for cycling, photography, and the Hudson River. Thanks for joining me today, Jeff. This is going to be exciting.
Thank you, Craig. It's my pleasure to be here. You and I have known each other for a long time. I admire the work that you've done over the years. And again, it's my pleasure to be a guest on your podcast.
I admire your work. My second favorite place in the world is the Hudson River Valley. And I just get more amazed when I see the things that are happening, transforming things there all the time.
And in true confessions, sometimes when I visit you up in Florence and the Pioneer Valley, I think that the Berkshires and the Pioneer Valley, they don't play second fiddle to the Hudson Valley. You've got it all going on up there as well.
Well, we grew up around here, so it's easy to stay where you grew up, I guess.
That's true.
Let's talk about the state of rail trails in the Hudson Valley. How have these trails evolved over the last few decades, and what are some standout success stories from Scenic Hudson's work, and how are these projects helping local economies and small towns thrive?
Well, I'll take that first one first. How has this system of, now it's a system. It wasn't a system 35 years ago, and 35 years ago, the railroads were all being abandoned. At that time, due to the efforts of just everyday people and land trusts, one by one, these dead railroads were turned into, in segments of dead, not even the whole railroad, just segments, maybe 7-mile long segment, a 4-mile long segment, were turned into rail trails. For example, the Walkill Valley Rail Trail, back in the early 80s, there was an idea to have a trail there. That goes now from Gardner to New Paltz to Rosendale, and as part of that is part of the Empire State Trail, 750 miles long. But back in the early 80s, after the train stopped running in, I think, 1977, in the early 80s, the people in New Paltz said, hey, let's create a trail here. It took a while, but the Walkill Valley Land Trust eventually purchased that and created the section between New Paltz and Rosendale. I think that was about 7 miles, not that long. Shortly after, the Hudson Valley Rail Trail was conveyed from the Ulster County, which took it for back taxes, to the town of Lloyd. And that was about 4 miles, I think. So they started with these kind of short segments, and then little by little, as the short segments became popular, interest grew, they were extended and eventually connected to larger systems. And at some point today, what I really want to talk about is the 3 phases that I see. The segment here, the segment there, that's phase 1. Phase 2 is when you start connecting the segments. And I think we've done that pretty well. The third phase is to connect that system with complete streets, better bicycle, pedestrian, and transit infrastructure into our communities, the places where people live, work, and play. So I can tell you, I mentioned a couple of these rail trails. There are so many, it could probably take the whole half hour or however long we have, just talking about each one of them, but there are many right now. They're all being connected and they're transforming our communities. Once sleepy little villages, where I live in Highland, when I moved there 34 years ago, there wasn't much going on. Now we've got, for example, a bike rental shop, a bike repair shop, 2 art galleries, 4 Asian restaurants, a brew pub, a coffee and beer house, and it's just this little 2 block area. So we've
Wow.
really come a long way. And it's
Wow.
all, I think it's all because of the Hudson Valley Rail Trail, Walkway Over the Hudson, and people's interest in being outdoors and recreating.
That's great. What drew you to live across the street from a rail trail, and how has that shaped this perspective? And how do personal experiences influence the way people view trails as a community asset?
As I've always loved the Hudson River, and I've had a little boat down at a marina on the river. And for 30 plus years, I've been driving down this windy little road to use my boat. And one day, as Walkway Over the Hudson was about to open in 2009, I saw a for sale sign on this bedraggled little house that I had passed hundreds of times and never looked twice at. But when I saw that for sale sign, and knowing that there was soon going to be this amazing transformation of a 100-year-old railroad trestle into a bicycle pedestrian park over a mile long, crossing the river, would give me bicycle access to work. I jumped at the opportunity. First time home buyer, I didn't know what I was doing. I contacted the seller's realtor. I let her make all the decisions, but I wanted that house so badly that I got in. So with that, I can walk my bike across the street through my neighbor's yard, get on the Hudson Valley Rail Trail, and within 15 minutes be to work at my old office. And now we have a new office that's even closer, actually right on the rail trail.
Wow. Why do trails hold so much emotional and cultural value for residents? What do you think?
I see trails as great connectors and places for people to be, exchange ideas, to become healthier, meet their neighbors. So there's a book by Ray Oldenburg called The Great Good Place. And he
Yes.
talks about the 3 places in our society. The first place is our home. The second place is our work. And then the third place, these are places where we go to exchange ideas, like the coffee shop, the brew pub, town hall, the post office, when you go get your post office box and you meet your neighbors. Well,
That's true.
trails really serve that purpose. So I think that's a combination. And also in this post-COVID era, there's been more interest than ever in people being outdoors. I see people on trails, and you asked about what it means to me. When I ride my bike to work across Walkway Over the Hudson, I see the same people every day walking for exercise, walking their dogs. So this isn't just something that they do once in a while. This is a daily part of their lives. And that's why I know that it means a lot to them.
Rail trails as catalysts for community revitalization. In Massachusetts, we call the old industrial cities gateway cities for once the deindustrialization started taking place in the 60s and 70s, those places like where I grew up in Holyoke, which was the most prosperous place in Western New England, the wheels fell off for 2 generations. And now they're banded together in the State House in a caucus called the Gateway Cities Caucus, the gateway entry for immigrants coming in to get a living wage job and experience the American dream. So the Gateway City Caucus in Massachusetts has begun to restore, reinvest in these places. Tell me about the Poughkeepsie experience in that realm. Is there a Gateway City Caucus in the New York State House? And what can we learn from projects like Walkway Over the Hudson, Empire State Trail, and the revitalization of things there?
I think we can learn from Massachusetts because we don't have a gateway city caucus, but I think that's an idea I'd like to bring to our public policy team. But more to your point, I think what New York is doing, we have a grant program that provides funding to small cities. We jokingly compare it to the Hunger Games. You apply, there's a competition, and then someone gets $10 million. Then the program was so popular, the state expanded it to even have smaller prizes or smaller grant funding. But the community has to put together a proposal of what they would do with that kind of money, consistent with a plan based on public involvement. And so this has been going on maybe 10 years or so. One by one, cities are getting it. Poughkeepsie just got their $10 million. And I think it's going to help transform the city. Kingston got it most recently. A lot of good things going on in Kingston. In Poughkeepsie, we've been a little bit slower, I think, but things are starting to pick up here. There is, of course, Walkway Over the Hudson. When that was opened up in 2009, we thought it would transform everything. And it took a long time. Of course, we had a recession in 2008, so it came on the heels of that. Things were a little bit slow, but it wasn't until Walkway Over the Hudson got connected to the Duchess Rail Trail, now part of the Empire State Trail, and the North Side Rail Trail. It's called the MJM North Side Trail. It's a north-south trail that intersects Walkway that goes up to a former urban freight line. It goes to a redevelopment site in the town of Poughkeepsie, former Hudson River Psychiatric Center, through the Marist University campus. And those trails and other city initiatives that are causing rezonings in the downtown are starting to make a big difference in the city of Poughkeepsie.
I didn't realize that spur going up to the north side went through the campus of Marist College.
Yeah, Marist, at one time, it wasn't the campus, but Marist has been purchasing land eastward of the college, mostly, but not exclusively, for dormitories.
Okay.
There's a new art building, a new medical facility, and a lot of new housing. So now, yes, that trail goes through the eastern portion of the campus. And there's also a very large abandoned industrial site. I think it's called Schatz, that the Dutchess County would like to find a developer for. I'll send you some information about that. And Craig, I hope you'll come visit sometime with your bicycle and we can come visit these places. But I think that's the next frontier for the city.
How can trail development, talking about your development project you just meant, inspire civic pride and sustainable planning? And what lessons can other regions take from the Hudson Valley's approach?
Trails make it possible. First of all, trails attract people from other places. The trails, when I see my little downtown hamlet of Highland on a Saturday afternoon, all the bicycles there, these are not exclusively locals. These are people coming from other places to enjoy the Hudson Valley in our community. So I think trails are a big generator of tourism. Something that has to happen, though, is that the land use along those trails has to transform from the old lumber yard that's now abandoned, the former industrial uses that relied on rail transportation. We need to have new zoning, and Pennsylvania calls this trail town zoning. They've got a book about how to rezone the land along your trail to permit and encourage the types of land uses that people want to enjoy along trails: cafes, bike rentals, retail, ice cream shops, and things like that. Because currently, it's really industrial zoning along a lot of these corridors.
Okay.
And there's not going to be any need for industry of this nature in the future.
Last night, I was at the unveiling of the From Rail to Trail, the documentary on PBS based on the book of the same name by Peter Hartnick. And a few weeks earlier, one of my friends who has been involved in the rail trail world for over 30 years, he's the one that really got me involved in the politics. I was only about the history of old railroads and calling out the history archaeology of those old uses along the way. And then I started getting involved in the politics of getting places to yes. How have public attitudes towards rail trails changed over time? And did I ever tell you about the 3 stages of truth?
You did, but I think it would be good to remind you.
And I mentioned this at the memorial service for my friend. We had it it was held at a park in Sudbury, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And there was like 200 people there. And and I asked people, has anybody heard of the 3 stages of truth? And no one raised their hand. And I said, the first stage of truth, when somebody proposes a newfangled idea, they'll scoff at that. That'll never happen. The second stage is where they become hard-bitten, dead-ender, fight to the last breath against that idea they don't want. And then the third stage of truth. Who could be opposed to that? And every day in my real estate practice, I talk to people and they say, what did you do before you became a realtor? And, oh, I was involved in all the rail to trail wars in the Northeast. And what do you mean? People were opposed to it? And so one of the reasons I stood up this podcast is to show people that these are not easy to do. And then Peter Hardnick's book and now the documentary also shares that how they were controversial and very hard to get built. It wasn't a frivolous, let's do this, and then they happen. It was very complicated stuff. And the question I've just asked is, how have public attitudes toward rail trails changed over time? And what factors led to this shift in mindset? And how can advocates continue to build support that to fill the gaps, to connect things, to expand just from the rail trail to, just as you mentioned a little earlier, about better bike lanes and biking commonly seen in the community rather than just having to put your bike on the roof or on the back of your car and drive to a trailhead and then go biking. And how do you see the shift taking place?
Yeah, I can give you a couple examples, Craig. I recall when the Hudson Valley Rail Trail was being proposed, there was this abandoned railroad, and I don't know, maybe there were people lurking back there, or there was it was a quiet place, there were no eyes on it. And the perception of the general community was this was not a place to be, or it's a place for bad people to be that might be involved in crime or stealing. So when the rail trail was first proposed, there were a lot of opponents that they'd play the crime card. They're going to be coming into our backyards and stealing, breaking into our houses and stealing our TVs. As it turns out, once the rail trail was built, it became so popular that people from 8 to 80, moms pushing strollers, grandparents with their kids, with their grandkids on bicycles, were on this trail. It was not a place where anybody doing anything wrong wanted to be. And eventually, I have spoken to people that have told me they were opposed it, but now I just bought bikes for my grandkids and I ride with my grandkids. And similarly, we had a waterfront park. We have a waterfront park in Highland. It was a former oil terminal. A lot of these small oil terminals along the Hudson River are no longer viable. When this was proposed for a park, people were against it, thinking that kids would be running out. The railroad runs right next to it, the freight line. Kids would be running out in front of trains. That never happened. The park is so popular now. So between our waterfront park, our rail trail, and other parks in town, the more people that use it, the more people will protect it, and the easier it will be to use these success stories to encourage more rail trail development in the future.
That's great. What's the biggest challenge in transforming dead railroads into thriving community assets? And how do funding, zoning, or environmental issues play a role? And what partnerships make these projects successful?
Well, from my experience and what I know is that some of these railroads have been deeded back to the adjacent property owners. And once that happens, I think it would be next to impossible for a trail to be built on that. At least it would be a much more difficult. I think I'm not the best to answer that question entirely, but all I can tell you is that I know that we have the old Maybrook line that goes through the town of Lloyd and then curves back to the southwest. Right of way has been deeded back to property owners. So in order to create any connections there now, we're going to have to use public streets.
Okay. How do trails connect people, not just physically, but socially and economically? What are some powerful stories of transformation you've witnessed, and how do these spaces foster inclusion and community engagement?
Well, at Scenic Hudson, we like to say our parks are for everyone. And when I see the rail trails here in the Hudson Valley, they're for everyone as well. As I already mentioned, when I see the same people walking every day, when I ride my bike to work, I see the same two gentlemen with Marist University hats on. I wave to them, greet them, and say hello. I think that helps build community. We have events on Walkway Over the Hudson all the time on our local rail trails. We have 5K runs, Easter egg hunts. We open Walkway Over the Hudson at night for stargazing, for fireworks, and these types of community events bring people together. I think we need to think of rail trails as parks, linear parks, open and available to everyone.
How does Scenic Hudson collaborate with schools, residents, local governments? You mentioned the events on the walkway. Do these events and storytelling shape public perception?
Yeah, we engage with school children. We have something called Aqua Blitz. This doesn't really have to do with a rail trail, but we've got some tributaries into the Hudson River. We have school children go down to the Fallkill Creek, for example, and they go netting to see what kind of crayfish and other aquatic life are in the creek. So we want to connect people with nature, especially children from the youngest age, so that when they grow up, they're going to care for nature and protect nature. We have a strong connection with Marist University, where I work. I've personally supervised some of my students here doing bicycle and pedestrian assessments of the sidewalks in Poughkeepsie. So it's my personal goal to make sure that every resident on the disadvantaged north side of Poughkeepsie can walk safely down their street, push a stroller, or ride a bike to get to this beautiful walking park that we have called Walkway Over the Hudson. So I have supervised Marist students that have been out and measuring sidewalks, noting where crosswalks are missing, noting where ADA facilities, curb ramps to get down are not appropriately maintained. And we give that information to the city so that the city of Poughkeepsie can prioritize their limited dollars to fund these bicycle and pedestrian improvements.
What's next for the Hudson Valley Trail Network? Are there upcoming projects or opportunities to expand public access? And what's your long-term vision for the region's trails and communities?
There are two things, and one is the former Danbury line, or the Beacon Hopewell line. It goes from the city of Beacon on the riverfront to Hopewell Junction, which is an inland community on the Dutchess Rail Trail Empire State Trail. Dutchess County is undergoing a study now to create a rail trail there, and we hope that it won't be too long before that is constructed. So I think that's the next one that will come online. We also have in the Hudson Valley the Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, which isn't a rail trail, but it is a trail along the riverfront or adjacent between Cold Spring and Beacon that will connect the Beacon line, the new emerging rail trail, with the cities of Beacon and the village of Cold Spring. And coincidentally, this Hudson Highlands Fjord Trail, 7.5 miles, also intersects 3 Metro North Railroad commuter rail lines in Cold Spring, Breakneck Ridge, and Beacon, so that people from New York City can come up by train, don't need a car to get here, get off the train and go hiking.
You'll be interested to know that on my Mass Central Rail Trail from Boston to Northampton, the westernmost of all the intersecting trails from Connecticut at New Haven up to Northampton, that we took out the chalk blocks on a report about what that would be worth. I don't know if you knew this, but Connecticut has the country's best program for trail census, for counting numbers of trail users. And they have a program at Yukon Stores, Connecticut. If you just Google Connecticut Trail Census Yukon Stores, it will produce a site that has got years and years of data and showing trends and who's there, why they're there, how often they're there, when, the whole 9 yards. We use that public-facing data to pull together a report. It'll be done in a couple of weeks about what the trail from New Haven to Northampton, once it gets done, will mean to not only in Connecticut, but in Massachusetts, and its tie-in to the Mass Central Rail Trail. It'll be like a second stage or booster rocket to add dollars to that East-West Trail report we did a couple of years ago. And so your tie into a connected trail from near the Hudson River going into Connecticut, do you do any work with Connecticut on cross-state things? Or is it just like in Massachusetts that we don't cross over borders easily?
Scenic Hudson has not, and we're not working on that beacon line. We support what Dutchess County has been doing. We've written letters of support for them, and I hope that will be expanded eastward from Hopewell Junction clear into Connecticut. But I don't know if there are plans in the immediate future. I think they take it one step at a time. And once it's built from Beacon to Hopewell Junction, it's well used and it's well loved. I suspect that it would be expanded to the east. At least I hope it will be.
Well, this is interesting. Tell me about your new headquarters office there and its tie-in to the great story about an architect that was featured on 60 Minutes and his work in third world countries and how he circled back to his old hometown of Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, that was Mike Murphy. Mike is the son of the former and unfortunately the late DPW director of the city of Poughkeepsie by the same name, Mike Murphy. So Mike is his son. And Mike, I believe he was one of the founders of Mass Designs, and I think was actually founded in Boston. But Mike Murphy came back to Poughkeepsie when Poughkeepsie was struggling some maybe 15, 20 years ago to open an office in Poughkeepsie to bring good design to the city of Poughkeepsie. That office is still open here in Poughkeepsie. They've been assisting the city in a lot of their development review. They've designed a lot of buildings in the city of Poughkeepsie, including our new office here at 58 Parker Avenue. We call it the North Side Hub because it's at the junction of two rail trails. And you're right that Mass Designs has designed hospitals in Africa, Rwanda, that have an innovative system of ventilation so that windows open, fresh air can come in, and the people that are being treated in the hospitals can have a more healthful environment to help them recover quickly. And we have a system here designed by Mass Designs in our office using trickle vents. And I'm not an expert on how this works, but it's my understanding it's the first one in the United States. Every window has vents that draw in air that's heated or cooled, and then it is circulated into the building. And then a 3-story atrium takes that air or allows that air to rise and exit the building, bringing fresh air in. So we don't have to have a conventional heating system, air conditioning system in our building. We have a green roof. All our stormwater is managed on site. We have solar panels on the roof and covering parking lot across the street. We generate more electricity than we used. And I think it's interesting to note that as a river organization, Scenic Hudson has been looking for a headquarters, had been looking since around 1999. And we have a lot of riverfront land. We looked in Poughkeepsie, we looked in Beacon, we looked in Kingston. And as we started, especially our land trust, as our land trust started doing more work in urban areas, because we want our work to be relevant to the people that live here. We don't want to just protect 500 acres on a mountaintop or on the riverfront to protect nature. We want to do that, but we also want to protect the places and cities where people live and they're going to benefit by the work we do. So as we started working more in the cities of Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, and Kingston, and we call this our Riverfront Cities program, we found, we invested in Walkway Over the Hudson, $1 million when it was about to open. We purchased the North Side line and turned it over to Dutchess County, which develops and operates it. And then at the junction of these two trails, a very large former industrial site, the Standard Gauge factory that made gauges for industrial uses, automobiles, airplanes during World War II, that came up for sale. And we purchased that, closed on it in 2020 when COVID was about to hit. And now 5 years later, it is just reopened as a very large office with a beautiful place for us to work, set in a public setting for the people of Poughkeepsie to enjoy. So this is an investment in the north side of Poughkeepsie at the junction of two rail trails.
Wow. And where I'm looking over your shoulder, I see the bright lit area. Can you just shape your camera
Let me see
to
what I can do
go?
for you. Yeah, this is the one of the two most coveted conference room. We call it a huddle room. This only holds two people. There's a larger conference room with a view like this, but it overlooks our three-story atrium, and you can see all the way down into the basement where we have a community kitchen for our employees, a beautiful place for us to
Yes.
get together. First and second floor, you can see a lot of the brickwork. They're still intact. Have married historic preservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy to create this workspace. And as you look up, it's probably too bright, but you might see the skylights that we have on our roof. This is the huddle room that everybody wants to use because it has such a great view and it's so inspiring.
This is great, Jeff. I'll be looking forward to my tour there this fall. We'll come out by you and yo-yo some lunch if you're around, if she's around, I should say.
That would be
But this is good. What else do you think we haven't covered here yet today? What else do you want to talk about?
I'm also working on a project that would connect the Westchester RiverWalk, which is planned as a 51-mile trail along the Hudson River from Yonkers all the way up to the county line at the Bear Mountain Bridge. The most significant piece that's missing is under the new Tappan Zee Bridge. Now it's called the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge. It's a very short connection, about 0.6 of a mile, but it's important to connect the Tarrytown waterfront and its train station to the historic sites and neighborhoods south of the bridge. So it's a very complicated project. It involves cooperation with Metro North Railroad, New York State Thruway Authority. We have a lot of partners, Village of Tarrytown, Westchester County raised a lot of funds to make this happen. And we look forward to establishing this really important connection along the riverfront in the Hudson Valley. And by the way, that there also would be connections across the Cuomo Bridge on we call it the shared use path that goes across that 3-mile bridge to Rockland County. It's all about connections. And maybe what I'd like to leave you with is a quote that I heard a long time ago. I heard it was attributed to Frederick Law Olmsted, but I cannot find that direct quote. So I'll just say, I believe that we can have the most well-designed, the best parks in our communities, but unless they're connected to the places where people live, work, and play, they're really not living up to their potential. And I think rail trails, and especially this third phase, connecting the rail trails into our neighborhoods, our business districts, our schools, universities, parks, places where people live, work, and play, we have to connect them with sidewalks, crosswalks, bike paths, complete streets, so that people can actually get there. And I'll tell you, it breaks my heart when I see the intersection here in Poughkeepsie of Washington Avenue and Parker Avenue, where people access Walkway Over the Hudson. There's not a crosswalk across that intersection. And people can drive here from Westchester County or Boston. They may have a very expensive car. They can get out with their stroller. Their children can go across Walkway Over the Hudson. But the mom in Poughkeepsie with a child does not have a safe way to cross that street to get to Walkway Over the Hudson at that intersection. And I'm still working to make sure that is provided for the people that live here.
Would a letter to the editor, to the DPW, or
I think the curbs need to be different. There are a lot of things that need to happen, and I think it's appealing to the city administration and having the city residents press is what. Yeah, I'm afraid that our letters to the editor, our media is just not the way it was 30, 40 years ago, where letters to the editor really carried a lot of weight. That's my opinion.
Okay. I'm glad we had this chat today. I always learn something new and inspirational when talking to you. And I'm looking forward to seeing your new office space this winter there.
I look forward to seeing you again, Craig. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, we'll see you on the road less traveled.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to Roads Less Traveled with Craig Della Penna. I hope today's episode gave you fresh ideas and inspiration for exploring the unique world of real estate, rail trails, and bike tourism. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share the show so we can reach more trail lovers and real estate enthusiasts like you. Stay connected, stay curious, and I'll see you next week with more expert insights and stories from the Roads Less Traveled.